The 582nd edition of the Four Corners podcast starts right now.
This is the Four Corners podcast.
And that could make a difference. Lawson at the buzzer. Got it! Maybe not. Ty Lawson wins it at the buzzer.
Deep three. And Green rips down the rebound in traffic. 4-on-1.
What a great job. What a terrific job in transition. I mean, you couldn't plan that any better as a coach.
Gets the roll. Here we go. Page has it. Carolina down one. 84-83. Page into the front court with 4 seconds. Page to the rim. Got it! He got it! 9/10 of a second to go. Inbounds. Washington gets it to Warren. His full court shot. No good. Marcus Page baby. Does it for the Tar Heels. Carolina wins it.
Don't force it if you're Goss.
Comes in. Blocked by Meeks. Buried up ahead to Jackson. And he tucks it down for the 5-point lead. Matthews off the mark. And this year the confetti is going to fall for North Carolina. They're not going to be denied this time. Inside 30 overall. Love, top of the key. Oh! Big time delivery.
Here are your hosts, Josh Marlowe and Anthony Pagnotta.
Hello and welcome in to another live edition of the Four Corners podcast. We are powered by Carolina Electrical Services. Josh and Anthony here with you guys on a Tuesday night. We were planning to go live tonight, planning to take the next step in the What If series. We still got to tackle the 1990s, but that has been pushed back to later in the week as the ACC basketball schedule for the upcoming season was released earlier today. And we're here to talk about that 18-game slate that Carolina will have to go through later this upcoming year, talk about some of the fun, notes and nuggets that come out of this schedule, go look at it month by month, and then ask some hard-hitting questions that face the Carolina basketball program, more importantly, its head coach, Hubert Davis, because how the team performs during the ACC season will be a telltale sign if he'll be Carolina's head coach for the foreseeable future. Before we get to that, though, we start every edition of the pod, as we always do, with the pod thought of the day. We go to Ken Venturi for today's pod thought, and that thought is, quote, "You are never better than anyone else until you do something to prove it. And when you are really good, you never need to tell anyone. They will tell you," end quote. And I think that's something that this Carolina team is going to have to chase this upcoming season, because I think they'll be preseason ranked inside the top 25, just given off the fact of their name. You return a guy like, Seth Trimble. You look at some of the portal additions. I do think it warrants Carolina being a preseason top 25 team, but I don't know how much they'll be patted on their backs when we gather next month, believe it or not, in Charlotte for ACC tip-off. I don't think this is going to be a team that's going to be picked to win the ACC. I think best case scenario, they're picked to finish top 4. And so I think it's something that, they'll have to chase getting praise, but kind of like they did when they kind of were in the same boat 2 years ago. Once they got the praise initially in November and December, well, we knew in January and February and March that was a team that was a capable team of making noise come March. And so where last year Carolina was having to make a case for itself to be a team that was included in the NCAA tournament, the hope is this year that's not the case, and it's the media telling the basketball world just how good this squad is.
Yeah, I think there is certainly a chance that Carolina is going to be able to get some fanfare, out of the gate. I think, the thing is, in the preseason, they're not really going to be as hyped as I think they've been in years past. I think they're going to be a team that's probably going to be picked to finish, as you said, maybe top 4. And if it was, it'd be 4th in the conference. And outside of that, most people will probably pick them to finish a little bit lower in the conference. So they're going to be a middle tier team in the ACC. But the good news for them is that if you want to get that hype, if you want to get people talking about you right out of the gate, you've got a chance to do that. All you got to do is beat Kansas. You beat Kansas at home, all of a sudden we're starting to have that conversation about how good this Carolina team can be. And I think, the thing is that hopefully this is not a crew that is going to really worry about that kind of stuff. But it just, the thing is that even with the schedule that Carolina has, where it isn't necessarily the toughest schedule, there are chances to put yourself in a position to, really make the NCAA tournament before you even get to ACC play. You've got Kansas, you've got Michigan State in a neutral site, and then you've got Kentucky on the road. Those are chances for you to really solidify yourself as a tournament team, I think, right there. So, they're maybe not going to be as hyped coming in. Hopefully this is a team that doesn't necessarily need the hype in order to be able to succeed. But this is a team that will be able to still have the opportunities that they need to be able to, get their name on the radar, get people talking about them early in the season on this schedule. So nothing new for Tar Heel basketball around here, just not nearly the expectations that they've had in years past.
Let's go ahead and get into the order of business tonight, and that's dissecting the 2025-2026 ACC basketball schedule. As I typically do, I found myself lost in thought the other day and was wondering, when are we going to get the schedule? Because the ACC does a horrendous job marketing when they're going to let the schedule be put out. It came out this afternoon about, I guess it was in the 3:00-ish hour or so. I was sitting at home playing video games, listening to a podcast when the schedule came out. But I had the thought the other day that we had to be getting close. And, of course, we get it today, and that's what we're here talking about tonight. Before we go through it month by month, I did put together a little one sheet of just facts and notes about the schedule. Some of it a reminder, and then some of it, I got from Adam Lucas's Rapid Reactions article that he wrote over on GoHeels.com. With the league moving from 20 games back to ACC or back to 18 games, the schedule does look a little bit different. You only play two teams twice. In case you forgot, those two teams this year are Duke and Syracuse. No longer the given for the Heels. Well, they'll play Duke and NC State twice every year. I criticized that decision back in the summer, and I will relitigate that criticism here once again. It's absolutely stupid and beyond me, with all the hype around that Wolfpack program, that they did not make NC State come to Chapel Hill and make Carolina visit the outhouse that is the Lenovo Center. The teams that Carolina will play just at home this year include Pitt, Clemson, Florida State, Wake Forest, Virginia Tech, Notre Dame, and Louisville. That Louisville game being in Chapel Hill could be a big one when we're looking at this end of season standings come the month of March. The teams that Carolina will play just on the road, they'll make the West Coast trip to see Cal, Stanford, and SMU. They'll travel to Miami, Georgia Tech, Virginia, and as I mentioned, NC State. The lone school that Carolina does not play in this upcoming ACC season is Boston College. That'll be changed next year, where they'll play the Eagles, but there will be a different ACC team that they will not face in the 26-27 campaign. One thing you like to look at when you get the schedule, how many ACC home games are on the slate. And Carolina had a lot, and it feels like they've had a lot the past couple of years. That number is down to just 4 for this season. Those 4 home dates include Wake Forest, Duke, because they've made both Duke games weekend games for TV. Pittsburgh will come to Carolina over the weekend, and so will the Virginia Tech Hokies. Probably the biggest thing I check out the most are the Saturday, Monday turnarounds. The Heels have just 2 of them, and they get the benefit of the back end of those being in Chapel Hill. Their first one will become at Georgia Tech. They'll have a home date with Syracuse. The second one will actually feature a road date at the Orange, but that home game will be a return game against the Louisville Cardinals. And with Carolina having so many Monday fixtures on the schedule, they will be featured on ESPN's Big Monday twice, both games in Chapel Hill against the Syracuse Orange and the Louisville Cardinal. Before we go month by month, any reaction from you about the list of news and notes I put together in regards to Carolina's 2025-2026 ACC slate?
Well, a fantastic list of news and notes, by the way, to get everybody caught up on the schedule. I think very interesting that you, of course, do not play NC State twice. That is certainly something that I think is pretty outlandish, to be honest with you. I think that certainly is something that we expected, even with the conference moving to this style of scheduling, that Carolina was going to be a team that was going to be the exception. But we knew this earlier this offseason, that Carolina was not going to be an exception, that these teams in this area will not see each other nearly as often. There's potentially going to be a year where Carolina doesn't see NC State at all. Now, I would hope that the conference is smart enough to not have that as part of the rotation, but that is something that I was thinking about earlier today. Is there a chance that Carolina will not end up playing NC State at all in one season here at some point down the line? Hopefully that's something they get ironed out by that time. Hopefully by that time, maybe the conference is smaller. Maybe we have another round of conference realignment, which sort of breaks things up and gets us back to some of the conferences that we were used to when we were younger. I think that is certainly going to be on the table with the amount of travel that you have to do in some of these conferences. But yeah, I mean, the other stuff that really sticks out, I think, the Saturday games, much fewer than you're used to in Chapel Hill, especially based off of last year. That was really, I think, what should have signaled us that there was going to be a turnaround. There were so many home games last year on Saturdays. And I think this year you're sort of seeing the other side of that, where Carolina is only going to have 4 at home. And I mean, look, they're games that are attractive. The one against Wake Forest and Duke, certainly attractive. You got the game against Pittsburgh, which has sort of become its own mini rivalry between the two sides. Virginia Tech's probably one that's like, how great really is that? But I definitely think it certainly, still provides a test for Carolina. Virginia Tech always seems to provide a test for Carolina no matter where they play. So I think that'll be, a decent home slate to go off of. And then with the Saturday, Monday turnarounds, I think you got some really beneficial ones for you. I think at Georgia Tech, certainly a place where Carolina has at times lost, but you would figure that this is going to be a team that even, though Damon Stoudemire seems like he might have, some things going there, or is hoping that he has some things going there, I don't necessarily look at them as a team that's really going to be that big of a challenge for Carolina, not as big as some of the other teams that are going to be on the schedule. Syracuse, I think, is still, with the Adrian Autry era still going on there, it makes sense that they're not necessarily going to be a great team. The most challenging one is going to be Louisville. But the good news is that you get that game at home. So I do think, based off of some of the Saturday, Monday turnarounds that we have seen before, this certainly isn't the worst, and I think is one that Carolina can definitely stomach.
All right, let's now take a look at this schedule, and we'll do so month by month. And I was nice enough to bring a little graphic to the table for you guys to make it easier for y'all to follow along. So we'll look at the month of December first and foremost. Carolina with just one game in the final month of the 2025 calendar year. It'll either come on New Year's Eve or on New Year's Eve when they'll host Florida State. That date has not yet been finalized. A trend you'll see throughout the schedule, and it's really a decision that I understand why the ACC is doing this. Is to really be more flexible with their TV partners to have their games in bigger and better prime viewing, which we all know with the way the ACC is beginning to do the revenue sharing, and ratings are going to play a part in that. This is a part of that kind of new revenue model coming to the conference. So just one game in the month of December. The only difference is That game is now at the end of the month, as opposed to that game traditionally the first weekend in December when you were playing 20 ACC games. You turn the calendar to 2026, and Carolina begins with 3 of 4 on the road, including all 3 on the, either on the Midwest or on the West Coast. They'll travel to SMU on January 3rd. They'll come back with a week off to host Wake Forest on January 10th. And then on January 13th or 14th, they'll travel to Stanford. And then on January 17th, they'll travel to Cal. They'll then come back from that West Coast trip and host Notre Dame on either January 20th or January 21st before 2 more road dates to close out the month. They'll travel to Virginia on January 24th. They'll travel to Georgia Tech on January 31st. So just 2 home dates in the month of January for Carolina, but that means a lot of home games on the back end of the schedule. You move to February, and Carolina starts with back-to-back home games. February 2nd, they'll host Syracuse. February 7th, that's when Duke will make its way into Chapel Hill. On February 10th or the 11th, Carolina will make its way down to Coral Gables and take on Miami. On Valentine's Day, while everyone will be out with their significant others and their wives celebrating, we will be at home watching Carolina play host to Pittsburgh. That, though, is on a weekend game, so maybe you're lucky enough to take your wife, your girlfriend to the game as a part of the way you're going to celebrate that holiday. Then on either February 17th or the 18th, Carolina will make the trip to NC State. And then February 21st, they'll make the trip back up the road to Syracuse. They'll take on the Orange in the second of 2 games against them. 2 more home dates to close out the month of February for Carolina. February 23rd, they will play host to Louisville. And then February 28th, they'll play host to Virginia Tech. And then you turn the calendar to the month of March, the best month of the sport calendar year. On either March 3rd or March 4th, Carolina will host Clemson as a part of their senior night before they close out the season on the road on March 7th against the Duke Blue Devils. So that's a look right there at the ACC schedule for Carolina. Before we start really diving in and I start asking you the hard-hitting questions, I mean, Carolina's got a handful of dates where the game isn't even yet set yet.
Yep.
And I think it's more beneficial for us that those games are more so on the road as opposed to at home, because it makes it that much harder, I think, for fans to buy tickets this early in advance. Something that typically when we buy tickets, we look at the schedule, we look at the dates, see which make the most sense. We buy the tickets now. It's harder to do that when these dates aren't finalized. What do you make of that decision overall? And you look at Carolina's schedule, and I'd argue as much as any ACC schedule throughout the conference, they're the program that's most impacted because 5, 6, 7 games aren't even finalized as of today when the schedule was quote unquote officially released.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot, man. I mean, you've got Florida State, that's a home date. You've got Notre Dame, that's a home date. You've got Clemson, that's a home date, that do not have set dates for the games. And I get it. You want to get these games on national television. You want to have these games be those revenue games. And for Carolina, they're going to benefit just about as much as anybody from this type of scheduling. But at the same time, yeah, as a fan, it's incredibly frustrating because if you want to go to any of these games, and luckily for Carolina, you know, when you look at it, you know, the one that's the most important is Clemson. Now, the thing is that I don't know if there's somebody that you are really that tied to. I don't know if there's somebody that people are looking to buy tickets for that senior night. You know, in years past, you had Armando Bacot. You had RJ Davis. In the years past, this would have been even more frustrating because you would have been like, look, I'm trying to figure out what this date is, what day I have to, you know, potentially ask off of work, what day I have to leave work early, whatever. I want to have these tickets purchased and I want to be ready to go, but I can't necessarily pull the trigger because I might be able to go on Tuesday night, but on Wednesday night I wouldn't be able to go because I have to wake up earlier for the next day of work or something like that. To me, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Like, just go ahead and schedule it now. I mean, what are we going to do? So this is going to be like each week, like we see with college football, where they're going to wait until 2 weeks out and then they're going to determine where exactly teams are going to play. That's going to be incredibly frustrating as a fan. Now, the thing, and I'm going to tell you exactly what's going to end up happening, is they're going to end up driving the prices up because they're going to know that people are going to be desperate around those times to purchase the tickets. So tickets will be more expensive than if you were to buy them now. That's what's going to be, I think, the most frustrating part for fans, where if you go ahead and pull the trigger on something now and just say, hey, we'll go either day, you're probably going to get a better price than someone that's going to have to wait it out, see what date the games are actually on, and then have to make that decision. So that certainly is a very frustrating part of this.
Yeah, I think, look, we benefit from there being so many TV networks and partners involved with college athletics because it gives us the ability to watch all these games, right? It was a lot simpler when you knew you played on Wednesday and you played on Saturday. Mm-hmm. And that used to be the thing really up until the 90s. Whenever we bring Michael Norwood on, he kind of talked about that. They knew they played on Wednesday and Saturday. Once they got into conference play, non-con was always different because you had to play when you could play. But once you got into conference play, you played 2 days a week because there wasn't as many TV networks that were involved. And so you just played those 2 days because you could carry all the games that were on TV back in the day. That's no longer the case right now, where virtually every game, especially for a program like Carolina, every game Carolina plays is going to be televised in some form or fashion. And for Carolina, they won't complain about this because if it gets them in bigger TV viewing markets, that means more money. And that's the name of the game right now with revenue sharing being made legal. You've got $20.5 million you got to pay out. It's easier to pay that out when you're making more money. So they won't complain. It does put a burden on the fan. And so while they'll look at those TV numbers and be pleased, they don't want an empty arena either. And so I don't think that's going to be the case. Carolina fans show up, show out because, that's the kind of fan base that we have. But I do find it frustrating when I'm trying just to write an article and write the dates down, and I can't even write specific dates because they're not yet finalized. Unfortunately, this is not going away. As long as Carolina's in the ACC, as long as the ACC is doing the ratings revenue share, then it's going to impact Carolina directly because they're going to try to put Carolina in as many prime viewing markets as they can throughout the course of the 18-game conference slate. Let's now get to on-the-court stuff and the stuff that really matters. When you look at the way Carolina's schedule begins, 3 of the first, you have the one home game against Florida State to end the 2025 portion of the season. But once you turn the calendar to 2026, it's 3 out of 4 on the road for Carolina, 5 out of the first 7 for Carolina. And those first 3 road games are the 3 furthest road trips for Carolina all year. They'll go to SMU, they'll go to Cal, and they'll go to Stanford. When you see that many road games out of the gate for a team that's breaking in 10 new players, do you maybe look back at the non-conference schedule that Hubert Davis put together and wish he maybe put another road game or 2 in November and December?
I do not, because I think that the most important thing for this group is that they are a confident group. And in order to get to that point, I do think that this is a crew that will need to be at home, that will thrive with, being able to build that momentum against some lesser opponents. And I think it'll allow this group to come together because, again, here you look at, Luka arriving a little bit later than they probably wanted. This will give them a little bit more time to sort of gel as they go throughout the non-conference season. And we talked about it so much with the confidence of this team last year, it just didn't seem like they were confident because of how difficult of a schedule they played out of the gate. And I think once they lost that confidence, it was really hard for them to be able to regain it. Now, maybe you look at this start to conference play, and maybe you say that's going to be where Carolina could lose their confidence because they're not necessarily going to be playing at home nearly as much. To me, I still think by that point, they'll be, in a spot where they feel good about where they're at. That will sort of carry them, I think, in games against, teams like SMU, who I think, has a chance to be pretty solid this year. But you look at, Stanford, Cal, those are teams that you would believe you should be able to beat this year, should be close to bottom of the conference teams this year. And then Virginia, still trying to figure out what exactly they're going to be under Ryan Odom. And at Georgia Tech, that should be one of those games on the schedule that you look at and say, probably one of the easier ones that you play throughout the season. So I think that's the thing is, yes, it is a lot of road games, but it's also against some of those teams that should be a little bit easier on your schedule. I think Virginia is probably the one that you look at and think we don't know enough about them, so we can't really tell what type of test that's going to be. But all the other ones, I mean, maybe SMU is a team that's threatening to make the NCAA tournament this year, but, we'll have to wait and see on that front. I look at that and I look at a stretch that even though it is on the road, it's still very winnable for Carolina. And I like what they're doing by playing a lot of the non-conference games at home.
Yeah, normally I would, if I see 3 out of 4 on the road, I see a West Coast trip combined with a trip in Dallas, and Carolina only goes on one, road trip in the non-conference season, I'd probably raise my eyebrow and say, yeah, I don't like that. I think in the future, I think Carolina will be on the road more in November and December, although Hubert Davis is adamant he wants to play as many games at home. He wants to give his players the opportunity to play in the Dean Dome as much as possible. When you're breaking in this entire new roster in a year that we feel like is make or break for the head coach, you need to go on the road with answers. And so you use the word confidence. I'll use the word answers as to why this non-conference schedule allows Carolina to show up into ACC play and know who they are. They did not know who they were when they got to Louisville last year I think it was on New Year's night when ACC play kicked off in full gear. They did not have an identity. And it took them until literally the middle of February to have that. And luckily they got hot enough to put together enough wins to get into the tournament. But, when you're a preseason top 10 team, that's inexcusable. And it's why there's so much speculation around Hubert Davis's job security. That should not be the case this year. This team should know who it is. This team should have a firm grasp of what its rotation is going to be like once they get to that Florida State game. Because if not, if we're sitting here and that team goes 7-4 in non-conference play, and there isn't, a clear leader, if there isn't an established number one scorer, if the rotation isn't coming into form, then the questions around Hubert Davis will only continue to rise because Carolina won't win at the level for him to be confident to be Carolina's head coach moving forward. That's just the reality of the situation. And so that's why I do most years I want to play a tough non-conference schedule. I like what they did last year, I believe in, because typically Carolina wins more than they did. That was not the case, but I think this was the right move for Hubert Davis, and it will allow them to, you take 3, if you win 2 of 3, because if they lost to SMU, would not be surprised. You should still go beat Cal, and you should still go beat Stanford. On top of taking care of business at home, then I think, we'll be more than satisfied with the start to the season, albeit so many games being away from Chapel Hill. There's always a part of the schedule that we identify and say, this is where it's going to make Carolina's chances to win an ACC regular season title, maybe compete for a 1 seed, so on and so forth, or it's going to break them and they'll finish top 4, maybe be a 3 seed come Selection Sunday, yada, yada, yada. when you look at this schedule, where is that for you? Because it usually shows up at some part in February. Do you think that's still the case, despite there being 2 less conference games this year around?
Yeah, I would say that probably is the area that it shows up. If I looked at a 3 or 4 game stretch for Carolina, which really determines where they're going to be, I would say it would be the 4 game stretch where Carolina plays Pittsburgh, at NC State, at Syracuse, and then Louisville. I think that's probably the area that tells you what exactly Carolina is. Are they a contender for the ACC? Or are they not? I think that's really the stretch that sort of tells you that, because Pittsburgh is going to be a team that, even though, again, that game is at home, Pittsburgh has walked into your building and they've won in recent years. And they are expected to be still a really tough team again this year, play very similar to how they have in years past. At NC State, explainable enough, especially with all the hype that's going on around their program this year. I also do happen to think that they are going to be pretty good. I think they probably are an NCAA tournament team. So, the fact that fact, I think alone sort of shows you that that's going to be a very important game for Carolina. Syracuse isn't necessarily the most important game in there, but that is kind of a throw-in game. Also, it is on the road, so it's not nothing. Carolina certainly has to be prepared for that game. And then you've got the turnaround against Louisville on the Saturday, Monday after the game against Syracuse. And again, if you can beat Louisville, that really shows me that you are contenders in the ACC, because I think Louisville, probably the second best team in this conference, if not the best team in this conference this year. With everything that they went and did in the transfer portal, they are right there with Duke. So if you could find a way to win that game at home, I think that would be a big statement. If Carolina finds a way to go 3-1 during this stretch, I think that shows you that they probably are contenders in the ACC. God forbid they go 4-0 during this stretch. That would show you they are definitely one of the better teams in the ACC this year. So I think that's probably the little 3-4 game stretch that I look at on the schedule and say it's crucial, because if you're just looking at a stretch, a longer stretch, what's that one that really sticks out? It's really the back half of conference play. It really starts with February 2nd and goes all the way through March 7th. Just as it always is for Carolina, it's always the most difficult point of the season. And I think once again this year, there's no question. In years past, you've had some of those more difficult ones that we were able to sort of battle back and forth with when we looked at the non-conference schedule. This year, there's absolutely no question that stretch at the through February into the beginning of March is easily as difficult as it gets for Carolina in this schedule.
Yeah, I would just extend it out from at NC State, February 17th or 18th, to the home date with Clemson, March 3rd, March 4th, which just goes 2 games past what you went, because, you exclude the Duke game because Duke is Duke. And there's pressure. Like, there's always pressure to beat them, greatest rivalry in sports. You lost to them 3 times. By God, you got to respond. You can't lose 5 straight times to them if you want to invoke confidence in your fan base that you should be on the sidelines competing against what John Shire has done in his brief tenure over there in Durham. So if you exclude the road game at the end of the year against Duke, you extend that out to Virginia Tech and against Clemson, because I think what's really tripped Carolina up was maybe if they beat Stanford a year ago. In a game that no one thought they were going to lose, how different does that season go? And so I think it's fair to put those games against Virginia Tech and the Clemson team that I don't think no one knows anything about because they just lost so much. But can Carolina avoid, hiccups? Can this team avoid the letdown games on top of, because I think they'll show up for the States. I think they'll show up for the Louisvilles. But it's those other games kind of in between that will ultimately, I think, make or break this year's squad, because I think there's a scenario where Carolina can stack a lot of wins and really run their win total to a number that is in the mid to high double digits, which it needs to be to compete for a regular season conference championship. But that's only possible if you avoid the thing that really hindered them a year ago, which was playing at a consistent high level, game in, game out. And so you're right. For me, in totality, it's from Duke game to Duke game. If you want to narrow it down, it's from the road game at State to the road game at Duke. But then if you really want to get a little bit smaller, it's that 6 games or those 5 games from the first game in Raleigh to the final home game of the season against Clemson that I do think will be kind of where we'll really know the backbone of this year's team. And if this is going to be a team that's, maybe do they go to Duke with a chance to win an outright ACC title or get a share of an ACC title? So we'll just ultimately have to wait and see how this conference does play out. I think this is a fascinating question. Last year, Duke went 19-1 in the ACC regular season to win the ACC regular season title. We've talked about the reduction of conference games from 20 down to 18, a decision that I know I agree with. I'm pretty sure you're in lockstep with agreeance as well. How many wins, though, do you think it'll take for Carolina, for whoever, to win an ACC regular season title? 19 last year for Duke. 2 years ago in Carolina did it, they were 17-3. Are you still looking at this as a 16-2, 17-1 type of record to win a regular season conference championship?
Yeah, 16-2 is right where I was at. I really think that the way that this conference is set up this year, you're going to have some teams that are going to be able to mostly avoid some of the bigger landmines. They might have some of those situations where they get a lot of really good teams at home. You're going to be, maybe you miss a really good team just altogether. That certainly is something that I think is interesting. And that's part of the reason why I think it's going to be like that. I think, we saw it last year. It was just ridiculous. I mean, you played everybody in the conference and you still had teams that were that good. So I think that this year it's still going to be 16-2. I think probably Duke or Louisville is going to win this conference. So I would believe that that's the number that you have to get to. But yeah, that's the area that I would look at if I'm Carolina. Is if we're trying to win this conference, we got to probably get to 16 wins. We get there, then we're probably at least sharing the regular season title. And I think that would be a nice goal to have as Carolina going into the season. Now, do I think that it's a requirement that they end up getting to that spot, that they end up winning 16 games and just see where it goes from there? I would not say that's the case, but I do think that that's certainly a goal that they can have going into this season because, hey, man, this is Carolina. The goal every year should be to win the ACC regular season title. The goal should be to make it to the Final Four, and the goal should be to ultimately cut down the nets at the end of the year. But, for this team, I think – that they're looking to get there, it's going to be a pretty high number because this conference really does have some pretty good teams at the top.
All right, yeah, I agree with you. I think 16-2 is probably what it's probably gonna take. Maybe 15-3 gets it done. I guess the follow-up question is, do you think this is a roster capable of achieving that? Because I think there's no doubt that's the goal, because that's the baseline expectation for this program. Like where I hold them at in terms of being a Final Four caliber roster, I don't know if maybe every Carolina fan holds them to do that. That's where I am. You go to 21 Final Fours, in just over, I think 70, maybe 80-ish tournaments, it's fair to kind of hold Carolina to that expectation, but it really starts with being an ACC regular season champion. Do you think this roster is capable of going 16-2 in conference play?
Yeah, I would say I think it's capable of going 16-2. Now, to me, that is the ceiling of this team. I do not think that you can expect much more. Like this is not a team that's going undefeated in conference play. This is not a world beater team that's going to come out here and just demolish everybody that they play. I don't see this as, 09. I don't see it as one of those types of teams. But do I see this as a team that has the potential to, at its best, win the ACC regular season? Yes. Now, I do think they would probably need some things to break the right way for them. I think you would need, in order to win it outright, you would probably need Duke to be a little bit worse than people expect them to be. You would probably need Louisville to be a little bit worse than people expect them to be. So, I mean, look, I think that it's possible, this roster, because I do think that your starting five, what we expect to be closing five is really good enough, especially if Luka Bogovac is exactly who we think he is. If he is, then yeah, the sky seems to be the limit for this roster. But I do think that it is one of those scenarios that's on the table for me. Probably not the scenario that I think is going to happen leading into the season, but it's definitely something that's still in play for Carolina just because of the, history of the program for sure. But I do think that this roster was really built up enough to where you should be able to compete at a pretty high level in the ACC.
Yeah, I think they can win 16 ACC games. If Kyan Evans is the Kyan Evans I've talked him up to be, if Luka Bogovac is the wing scorer that they brought him in to be, if Caleb Wilson is maybe the best freshman in the ACC, if Henry Visar is the established big man that Carolina lacked a year ago until Ben Allen Lubin burst on the scene the last 10 to 15 games of the season. So it's capable. Is it likely? Is that going to happen? I think that answer right now is no. I'm nowhere near as confident in this roster coming together and achieving that as I was 2 years ago when Carolina rebuilt itself through the portal, brought in Harrison Ingram, they brought in Cormac Ryan. I loved that team from the jump, and they made me look smart. I don't think that's going to happen. I don't know if that's going to happen with this group. Which leads us to the last question and ultimately the most important question. How many ACC games does Hubert Davis have to win? Because I think that number might be higher than most people realize. I'll let you answer that first. If he wants to submit himself and put to bed the doubters and put to bed all the commotion around his job security, which he admitted without admitting last week. He said that he knows there's pressure. He feels it. How many wins does he have to achieve this upcoming year?
To take the pressure fully off of him, I think 13 wins is probably where you would feel like they have to get to. At that point, 13-5, you feel pretty comfortable about the team's chances to make the NCAA tournament. You'd imagine they have some pretty signature wins on the resume unless you just have one of the worst seasons that we have seen in ACC history, which, I mean, we say this, it feels like every year, but it feels like the conference is going to be better this year. I think that's a safe number for him. Could he get away with 12-6? Yes, possibly. If you beat the right teams, then I think you could get away with 12-6. But I think 12 to 13, that's the range that you're in, looking at an acceptable number for this year. If you get down towards 11, then you're probably on the NCAA tournament bubble, depending on what some of your losses look like and what the rest of the ACC looks like. That's when you start dissecting those wins and losses and trying to come up with which ones are good enough to actually get you to the tournament and which ones hurt you enough to keep you out of the NCAA tournament. That's not an area that Hubert Davis, I think, wants to be in this year. So to me, that comfort level that you got to get to if you're Hubert Davis is right there at 12 to 13 wins. And I don't think that's asking too much from the head coach.
Yeah, and then what I'm about to say is probably asking too much. I think he has to go 14-4 to really feel safe and secure about his job security moving forward. And I'll explain it as to why I think it has to be 14-4, because I think at 14-4, assuming that they do in November and December what they should do with that schedule, I think that puts him in a really good position. Barring going on the run and winning the national championship, he doesn't finish the season with double-digit losses. And I think that's something that, if this team goes 13-5, 12-6, they're losing double-digit games. And I don't know how well that's going to sit when considering the fact that would have been 4 out of 5 years this program lost double-digit games. And look, I know it's a different time. I know it's a different era. We are playing more games than ever before. You're only a year away from Carolina playing 32 games before they get to the ACC tournament, which means they could start playing as many as 41 to 42 games in the totality of a season. If Mark Pope of Kentucky gets his wish, he wants the schedule to expand to where they're playing 40 games on a given year outside of what you do in conference and NCAA tournament competition. So if you were playing that number of games, then double-digit losses, would be a lot more frequent throughout the country for even premier programs. But that is something that I think really weighs heavy on the minds of Carolina fans, on its boosters, and on that athletic department, is if they have double-digit losses and they go out before the second weekend, I think that really complicates things. Maybe I'm reading too much into that. But I think if this team is 24-11, 25-10, and they're not playing in the second weekend, I think his job security gets really called into question. You go 14-4, you win the type of games in the non-con that I think you're going to win. And I think they'll get either Kansas and Michigan State. I don't think they'll get both, but I think they'll get one. I don't think they'll win at Kentucky. So, you're putting yourself in that situation to go, at best case scenario, I think they play 13 non-conference games. So 10-2, or 11-2, maybe at worst 10-3. You go 14-4, you can have a 28-8 type of season, 29-7 type of season. People will feel a lot more comfortable in Hubert Davis moving forward. If you're in that double-digit loss threshold, I think people are going to continue to question, just because as a fan base, we're not used to losing double-digit games as often as it's happened in the last couple of years. And so that's why, normally I'd say 13-5, 12-6, okay. I think for where Hubert Davis is, where this program is, I think it has to be 14-4 in ACC play.
Yeah, I think that, that's certainly – it's a lot, man. In this conference this year, I think that, is probably asking a lot because,
it's Carolina basketball. There's no such thing as asking too much.
Then you're out. Then you're out on the coach. That's kind of where you're at, because I don't think this. In my opinion, I think 13-5 is probably where they get to, and to me, that would be fine. I don't have Carolina in a bad spot at 13-5, but I guess it depends on what the losses are that you're looking at. Like, if you have a loss to NC State on there, maybe that means you're out on Hubert Davis, and you think that it's time to move on. Like, to me, 14-4 with this conference, with the clearly, I think going into the season, Duke is better on paper than you. Louisville on paper is better than you. And I think there are some other teams in this conference that are going to be right there with you, probably battling for 3-4. Carolina's probably not going to get the benefit of the doubt based off of what they've done, what they did last season. So that's why they're probably going to be ranked 4th or 5th in the preseason. I think, that rate 13-5 is not necessarily the worst thing. So I would be satisfied with that. I think that probably gets you into the NCAA tournament at that rate, because I do think in the non-conference, I think you've got a chance to win Kansas and Michigan State. I think both of those are winnable games for you. I think Ohio State is a winnable game for you that you should be able to find a way to win. And at that rate, if you end up winning those games, unless you just completely collapse in conference play, or if we believe that some of these teams, are not necessarily going to be that good. Kansas, they haven't necessarily been great these last few years, not to their level that they're normally used to. I still think they're going to be an NCAA tournament team. I think that Michigan State is going to be an NCAA tournament team again this year. If Carolina ends up winning that game, well, then all of a sudden you're looking at this group and you're saying, man, Carolina's got 2 really signature wins on their resume. And then Ohio State, potential tournament team. I think right there, those are some really big wins for Carolina. I think once they get into conference play, they'll be able to pick up at least one or two other wins in conference play that I think can help them, because I do think they are going to split with Duke. And I think right there, that might be enough right there just to get you into the NCAA tournament. But if you are able to find a win over someone else that's potentially right on the borderline of going to the tournament, like a team like Wake Forest, who's there just about every year, Pittsburgh, maybe Miami bounces back this year under their first-year head coach, whose name is slipping my mind at this point. But I think it's certainly possible, and I would be satisfied with that if I was a Tar Heel fan. I think that would be the area that you need to get to. So maybe 12-6 isn't enough. 12-6, I think, might be enough if you get the right wins, and that would really involve you probably winning both games against Duke. Yeah. But if you can get to 13-5, I think that's a pretty safe number right there.
Yeah, if we want to be, if you want me to be honest with you, I think in reality they should go 15-3 in conference play. I see 3 losses in reality, which are at Virginia, and that's more so just because of how hard it's been for Carolina to win there. I know a lot of people are high on Ryan Odom. He's being talked about, not at the same level that Will Wade's being talked about, but a lot of people think that he's going to have them ready to compete in year one. Maybe he does. I look at that just from the horrors of Charlottesville for Carolina. It's very hard for me to expect them to win there because for a decade they did not. I expect them to split with Duke, just because, man, you can't get swept after losing all 3 matchups to them a year ago. And then the home game to Louisville, I'd probably say right now is a loss. I think every other game, Carolina should, the expectation should be to win. I'm not saying that's what's going to happen or that's what, I'm going to maybe officially predict, but that's where it should be at. And so if it's closer to that, I think that's a good thing for Hubert. If it's closer to 12-6, I think to me that's a bad thing for Hubert. Because I think, and this is what makes this tough, and it's why the best thing this team can do is win and win big. We don't really know what he has to do to be safe. Like, we don't know what the bare minimum is for him to solidify himself as the head coach. We really don't. For a lot of coaches that enter the season on the hot seat, the bare, for them to secure their job is to make the tournament. That's not good enough here. It never has been. It never will be. And if it's making the second round, if people that are anti-Hubert people, which we are not, but if he makes the second round, but Carolina keeps him, then there will be this notion that Carolina has lowered the standard of excellence and they've lowered the expectation demand, which I don't know if that's going to be true or not. And so that's why I think the best thing to do is just win, baby. Just win like Al Davis did, in the 70s and the 80s, to really put that talking point out of the ether. Because that's the last thing I want to be talking about in mid to late February, going into March, going into Selection Sunday, is what does the head coach have to do to achieve job security? I want to talk about the team and what can this team achieve? What can this team accomplish? But that's not the reality of the situation. We know it. That's going to be the cloud that hangs over the head from the time they take the floor in a few weeks for their first official practice until they either win the NCAA tournament or they get knocked out. That's going to be the thing that follows this program everywhere it goes. And so I think on the surface, I agree with you. 13-5, 9 times out of 10 at 90% of the schools in this conference, that gets it done. This is different. And so that's why I put it at 14-4. If Hubert Davis really wants to feel comfortable and confident that, when he tries to check into the office in early April, it's not getting the Jamal Adams meme for the Jets. He's able to walk through that door and conduct business like he's been doing the last handful of years. So we got a little bit of time, but before you know it, as I mentioned, we're 3 weeks away from practice getting underway. We'll be having these topics. We'll be having these conversations And we're really excited about it, really getting ramped up for what I think is going to be a much more pleasant and much more exciting basketball season than the one we had to endure last year. With that, folks, it is going to wrap up this edition of the Four Corners podcast. In the meantime, we will direct you guys to the website. That's heeltoughblog.com. Go read the article about the schedule that I put together for you earlier today. I went month by month, did add a little bit of those fun notes I put together for you as well. But you can find that article as we're going to slowly start trickling back in the basketball content. It's football season. It's football heavy right now on the website, but we will be getting you geared up for basketball over the next couple of weeks. As I mentioned, football season in full swing. Anthony has you covered with game previews, recaps, injury reports, and the like. So make sure you visit the website. That's heeltoughblog.com every single day, morning, lunch, and evening for the latest and the best coverage of Carolina basketball and Tar Heel football. As for the podcast, you guys know where to find us. Every major podcasting platform. Simply search the Four Corners podcast and we'll pop up. There, we encourage you guys to rate, review, and subscribe. That way you don't miss any editions of the show throughout the remainder of the basketball off season. And a reminder, we will be back later this week with the 1990s edition of the What If series. Be on the lookout for that edition. Hit that subscribe button. That way you don't miss that edition of that off-season series later up this week. With that, guys, that is going to wrap up this edition of the show. I do thank Anthony once again for hosting with me. We want to thank you guys for watching and listening. And as always, go Tar Heels.